Hello. It's time for another episode of Mr. Albert's class on YouTube. So grab your notebook and your popcorn, because today we're going to talk about Noiseless Patient Spider by Walt Whitman. So let's just jump right in. Start out with a noiseless patient spider. I marked where on a little promontory it stood, isolated. Marked how to explore the vacant, vast surrounding. All right, so what right away in those first three lines, notice we haven't had an end mark yet. It's all one big run-on sentence. But we have a lot of diction and imagery having to do with isolation, right? It's a noiseless and patient spider. It's on this little like precipice or cliff or like a little outcropping, right? This promontory, isolated even as one of the words, right? And then the vacant, vast surrounding, right? And that alliteration with the V even helps to enhance it. But it is a spider, and it's alone, and there's like a big world around it, right? And that's what it is. Okay. It launched forth filament out of itself, ever unreeling them, ever tirelessly speeding them. All right. So this then begs the question: why is that? Repeat it 3 times. Filament. And so again, I think this is using sound devices in order to help along the imagery, which is often what happens. And so if you think about if it were so quiet that you could hear the filament coming out of a spider, what would it sound like? And for me, all I think about is like Spider-Man when it's like, and so it's kind of like that, I guess. This is obviously written before Stan Lee came on the scene, but he's doing some of that, right? It's filament, like he's trying to, and it's enhancing or extending that sense of isolation that we had earlier, right? And so we just keep sending out these filaments and it doesn't work. Try again. Try ever unreeling them, ever tirelessly speeding them. Trying. Okay, so poor, lonely spider. Then we go to stanza 2. And you, O my soul, where you stand. Here's the crux here. So the spider is being compared to the speaker's soul. Has O there, right? O my soul, so that means it's an apostrophe. So he's talking to his own soul after observing the spider. Surrounded, detached in measureless oceans of space. Same imagery of isolation that we saw earlier, right? And so he's seeing his soul in the spider, right? So the soul is also on this promontory. It's detached, right? It's this vast, measureless oceans of space. Ceaselessly musing. And notice that those measureless and ceaselessly musing, those repetition of sound, it slows you down, right? And so you gotta pay attention. Venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them. To the bridge you will need be formed, to the ductile anchor hold, to the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere, O my soul. All right, so we slow down with those words: ceaselessly, venturing, throwing, seeking. Right, it's hard to say that line quickly, and we focus on all that imagery with the spider now is being attached to the soul, right? And so the soul is sending out filaments too until the bridge you need be formed, to that connection, to the ductile anchor. So that anchor, that first line that we need to like spin a spider web, that's the soul's looking for. It's looking for that. To the gossamer thread. So gossamer, right? It's thin, it's light, it's not very strong, and like a spider web, right? This is a tenuous kind of thing, and but from it you can start building something that is very big and strong and well, I guess relative to the spider. And so until this gossamer little thread that the soul sends out catches somewhere, right? Like the filament coming out of the spider to start a web. And it kind of ends there, right? And so it ends maybe a little bit on a question, right? Is the soul going to find this connection? Okay. And so that's kind of what it's about. It's about this comparison here. Now, for some background on Walt Whitman, and for those of you who don't care, you can just kind of skip ahead and go to the questions. But I think the background really helps to understand what is the poem really about. Okay. So Whitman, we always make a big deal out of him. He's writing in the 1800s. He's a huge fan of Lincoln, right? So if you've read any of his poems, it's probably been "Oh Captain, My Captain," talking to Lincoln after he died. He's a big champion of the North in the Civil War and things like this. And a lot of what he does, good grief, a lot of what he does is works to give America an identity, a face. Okay, and so he has this like deep rooted kind of paradox in a lot of his poems, that he was very patriotic and he loved America, but he saw a lot of problems in it too. And he saw that like this we were in a very defining moment in the 19th century, in the 1800s, that are we going to make it as a nation? Are we like legit here, or are we going to crumble the first time there's some conflict with the Civil War, something like that? Like, and are we going to stand up for our morals, or are we just going to like keep putting them off and not really do it? So he writes a lot of poetry about that. If I Hear America Singing, if you've ever heard that, or if you go look it up, it's about all these different working classes, all these individuals who come together to create the fabric of what is America, and it reads like a Disney movie or a Fiddler on the Roof, where everyone's just like doing their job, and in that out comes a symphony. And so like the hammer guy's like ting ting, and then the solid guy's like shh shh, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, there's a whole symphony happening. And that's what he did in his style too. He broke from all the traditional styles. Didn't use the constricting forms that were around before. It used to be you had like specific rhyme and meter you had to use. And he's like, no, I'm gonna do this free verse thing. And he still had a sense of rhythm. He still had senses of these things, but it was a truly original new style, right? Because again, he's trying to give America an identity. Didn't have much one. Then if you've ever watched Breaking Bad as well, he writes this book of poems, Leaves of Grass, and he goes through all these different poems that he says like this big conglomeration of different poems. This is what makes America. Like, I sound my barbaric yawp over the rooftops of the world. If you ever read that one,
I sound my barbaric yawp rooftops of the world. W. Uncle Walt again.
So and so that's coming from this idea of American individualism that Emerson and Thoreau started with transcendentalism. And so, and I'll get back to this poem in a minute. There's some influence of that here. So Emerson and Thoreau, they believe in American transcendentalism, and that's kind of the first truly American philosophy. It's a philosophy of individualism, right? And it's very, very active even today in our cultural values and so forth. But one of the really interesting things was that Emerson saw us all as individuals, but as part of a big, larger nature, and so he talked about this oversoul, this divine oversoul that connected all beings. And it was like in kindergarten class when you throw up the parachute, there's a parachute in the sky and it's like connecting everybody, and you're doing all the fun stuff, right? It was like that. So anyways, enter Whitman. Now Whitman, all the semi-recent, past several decades scholarship has said, he was a gay man living in America in the 1800s. Not easy, right? But instead of like getting bitter, he's still like loves America, but then obviously he struggles with finding place. And I think that also gives him a great capacity for empathy, and he understands all the different people that make up America. And so perhaps that's what's happening here. He talks about his soul desiring connection, right? That bridge will need be formed to the ductile anchor hold, needing that connection. Right, and you think of spider webs are almost invisible, and they can be gossamer or weak, but it's like that idea, right? Trying to find a connection and create a community, right? Yet still being an individual, things like this, and so there is this sense of loneliness and isolation, but it's not hopeless, which is the nice thing about Whitman. He often is hopeful, and so at the end he's like, it's until, right? Those last two lines, till the gossamer thread you flame catch somewhere, oh my soul. So there's a sense like not that it will never happen, but it will. It's not easy. I keep trying, sending out filament, but it can happen. All right, I've already gone for too long, so I hope you interact with some of that, and